So moving on to this afternoon's session, I'm delighted to introduce you to Jen Gates. If you've been a member of the community for a while, you might be familiar with Jen. A couple of years ago, Jen delivered a presentation on accessibility and data visualization, which was a hugely popular topic and kind of kick-started a love for data visualization within the Data Lab community. Jen was also quite heavily involved in our inaugural data visualization competition that we ran in 2023. Jen has worked across a wide range of data viz and data engineering projects, and more recently has turned to using AI and machine learning for the hospitality industry. Jen is committed to putting people at the center of data solutions, ensuring that data is used to support and enhance. And in this session, Jen will explore how accessibility practices in data visualization have progressed over the last couple of years, and also cover how emerging AI tools are kind of changing the way things are done. So that's everything from me. I'm going to hand you over to Jen now, and I'll see you at the end for the Q&A.
Okay. Steve, kind of check you can see the screen and you can hear me okay?
I can hear you and I can see the slides, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the intro, Steve. I'm Jen Gates. I've been working in data and data visualization for the past 7 years, originally in financial services, more recently in technology solutions for the hospitality industry. When people look blank at that, I explain that we make the tills in pubs. Data is very much central to my professional life, but my interest in accessibility comes from my personal life. I'm the middle of 3 generations of disability and have seen firsthand how inaccessible digital experiences have a real impact on everyday life. So, what are we going to talk about today? For those of you who are new here, and Steve touched on this, I talked about accessibility a couple of years ago for the Data Lab community. That original presentation, I think, is still available, and I highly recommend you watch that as well. I don't know if it's been edited out, but there's a great moment about 15 minutes in where my laptop battery dies and Steve has to fill for 2 minutes. Today, we're going to do a short retrospective of some of those original themes, look at what's changed over the past couple of years, and finally, how is AI impacting accessibility and visualization practices today? I would say I've made an intentional decision to keep the slides short on text and content today as part of meeting my own accessibility needs. However, a version with my notes will be available after the call, as will the recording. And obviously, as Steve said, happy to take any questions through the Q&A, and there'll be some contact details somewhere as well. So what did we talk about previously? We talked about the definition of accessibility first and what we actually mean by this. Accessibility is the practice of making information, activities, and/or environments sensible, meaningful, and usable for as many people as possible. This can mean things like physical accessibility, so ramps into buildings, accessible toilet facilities, or large print documents. But we might think of digital accessibility tools, which might be things like screen readers, screen navigation tools, or voice-activated apps. We also talk about some experiences which aren't necessarily addressed by tooling and maybe don't come to mind when we talk about accessibility in general. So what are some of those? Let's start with changing abilities. We think about how people's abilities change due to age or illness, or even their understanding of technology. Taking my own mum as an example, she's always had a reasonable grasp of technology. She could use a laptop and a tablet just fine. But she was diagnosed with macular degeneration a few years ago, which very quickly affected her eyesight. She lost a lot of those technical skills, as well as just being able to see what she was interacting with. And that really impacted her confidence around using even those devices. It got as bad as not being able to pay her energy bill through an automated phone line because she couldn't see and press the buttons quickly enough. So the process just kept timing out on her. We have tried smartphones, but in reality, the experience of learning how to use new tools is a lot more stressful. Her best tools now are things like magnifying glasses or being terse and obnoxious with people who work in call centres. We also think about differing devices. In our house, we have big internet and little internet. Some tasks are just better suited to laptops rather than phones, and it's not just down to like an app versus a browser experience either. I very rarely send emails from my phone. I get the big internet app. Partially it's personal preference, but for others, there are very real problems with apps that don't adjust well to changing devices, or the experience changes so significantly that a user is kind of learning 2 different methods of operation. And this doesn't take in the fact that phones now have the size and gravitational pull of a small planet. The experiences just aren't usable on a smaller screen. There are also economic barriers around device compatibility, where experiences are only designed to work with the latest or the best device. It's usually the most expensive, and people don't have access to that device for financial reasons, they are being excluded. That product has become inaccessible to them. And then access to resources. I've called it something fancy, but this in reality is me complaining about slow internet. I stood on Leith Street in the centre of Edinburgh on Saturday and couldn't get enough internet to check when the next bus was coming on the bus app. I had to check the actual paper timetable on the bus stop like I'm in a Mike Leigh film. Now, this really is first general problems, but people have become reliant on digital experiences to navigate their environment and navigate the world. And when they're being sold these experiences as the answer to everything, there is a real impact when those digital solutions are not available. Let's talk about my own experiences then. I'm always happy to share my own experiences as well. One, because I like talking about me, and two, I feel it helps people connect with why we're addressing some of these issues. So as well as my mum's issues with her sight, my daughter has ADHD, dyslexia, and Tourette's. We went through a lot of struggles in teenage years with some of the problems that are typical to those conditions, and this was only 10 years ago. There were still issues with getting support and diagnoses. So coping mechanisms were mostly based around resilience and creativity. In 2023, they were diagnosed with early onset cataracts in both eyes at the age of 24. Early onset for cataracts is usually around 40. Phoebe's vision deteriorated more slowly than we'd experienced with my mum, but they experienced foggy and cloudy vision in both eyes and colours appeared washed out. Eventually, we got surgery on both eyes to replace both lenses. One of the first things I noticed after the op is how green Asda vans are. Creative solutions to accessibility problems were kind of Phoebe's thing, and I think will forever be like that. But it included things like just picking up your laptop so it's closer to your face, and also phoning people like it's the 80s. Messaging for a young person became like out of reach because they couldn't see what they were doing. So we had a lot more phone calls than we did before. So that's my daughter's experiences. And then my experiences is I have ADHD. I was diagnosed around 4 years ago. ADHD is misnamed as a deficit disorder, but for me, it's really a surplus of attention. There should be a filter in my brain which helps me process sensory inputs, emotions, memories, and information, but that filter is on the blink. Essentially, I see, hear, and process everything. I can't avoid it. So my brain is in a constant state of overwhelm. This leads to millions of problems. Like one of the more relevant things, one of the many things I have trouble with is a lousy working memory. So working memory is the short-term memory system in your brain used for holding and processing information, for reasoning, learning, or decision-making. It's how you remember a phone number or directions, both of which I'm terrible at. I'm not very good at following sequential instructions because I don't retain the sequence. So even when a sequence is numbered, I will lose track of what the order of that sequence of instructions is. So I'm terrible with recipes. I also struggle with poor goal-directed persistence and sustained attention. Getting to the end of something is really difficult for me, and even tiny distractions can be incredibly destructive. So when I'm looking at visualizations, things like where they're overly colorful pieces are quite difficult for me, but it tends to be the variety of colors and not the contrast in colors, which is what we traditionally associate with accessibility, that's a problem for me. Also, overly cluttered dashboards are really a problem or difficult for me. Too many objects for me to find what the area of focus that the creator has intended to be. I touched on this before. It's one of the reasons why I've kind of kept the slide content for this presentation quite light touch. I used to include a lot more information to convey more of the message visually, but it's actually making it harder for me to present. I'm usually a light mode girl, but having less content this time has enabled me to use a darker color scheme without it making it harder for me to present. The slides help keep me on track. Like I have done this talk on multiple occasions and different places, and I will never remember it, ever. And my brain also will always try and trip me up by either making inappropriate jokes or going off track. There is a misconception that people with ADHD are good with chaos, but I definitely need structure to keep the wheels from coming off. We'll take a quick look next at just something that kind of helps describe my beef with some digital experiences. So when I was building stuff a lot in Tab, I always seem to end up on the Stack Overflow website. I find it really unusable. It could have passed like a accessibility test, a formal accessibility assessment, but for me, it's really difficult to use. And we'll just kind of go through that a little bit. So we've got the Stack Overflow website. We should be looking at a fairly simple question and answer. Navigation tools aren't a problem, search bars, those kind of things, they are, for me, an inherent part of the website, so I can cope with those. But I've typed in a question and it has brought me to this page. There's a question somewhere up here, but the first thing I see after the question is an advert. I don't see the answer. So straight away, my attention has started to wane because the hit that I needed is not there. That then gets compounded. There's some stuff over here in this left-hand menu bar. There's like some colors, and if this was an animation. So my focus is instantly switched to the left-hand side. I'm still not close to my answer. Add to that, oh, we've got this kind of beige yellow bar over here with lots of text in it. My brain has jumped over there as well, still desperately looking for the answer to my question. Eventually, I might get to the middle. There is more question before I get to answer. So although it looks like a functional website to me, if we think back to what I was saying about sequencing and steps and persistence, I have checked out at this advert or this item here. I already feel like I can't get the information I need from the website. I'm bored, I'm fighting for my life, and I'm moving on to another task already. Now, I use a website for this. I try not to use bad examples of visualizations in these sessions because I'm worried like I might offend someone, but I always make an exception for this one. Why is it like that? Instant rage. I need to get new material, right? This is quite an old visualization, and it still makes me quite curious. If there was an alt text for this image, it would be something like a bag of Skittles got drunk, stole your laptop, which only had MS Paint on it. I see a lot of examples today in visualization where things are overcomplicated or overpresented. There are absolutely artistic and aesthetic choices that are appropriate depending on the context. So for maybe data journalism or generally creatively led visualization, but this example still blows my mind. We're just trying to understand some sales numbers here, and I've picked a chart type because it looks more whooshy. For me, I cannot get the message that this visualization is trying to give me in a simple way. So moving on, we'll just do a quick retrospective of just some other points before we get on to what has changed in the past couple of years. So we talked a lot last time about the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG. These are international standards and recommendations around improving web accessibility and removing barriers to digital experiences. It's not strictly aimed at data visualization, but I always found it was a good starting point because there are some of those overlaps. So we'll just quickly go through those 4 principles that are up on screen as well. Perceivable. Information and user interface components must be presentable to users in ways they can perceive. Does visualization always need to be visual? And it's a strange one for this, but think about ways that your visualizations can be perceived differently. So if you include text in your visualization, that can be read by a screen reader, so people aren't as reliant on a chart. Equally, you could put alt text onto your charts as well that helps with screen readers and to describe that. And it's just thinking about ways, is ultimately we are talking about visualization here, and that does instantly create a barrier, but what can you put around your visualizations that kind of covers off some more of those sort of perceivability bases? Operable, user interface components and navigation must be operable. So things like keyboard focus, where you tab between items on a dashboard, links to other sources or other resources, and interactive experiences make a visualization more complex from an operation perspective. Like I used to love putting a filter on a dashboard, but it does add an ask of cognitive or fine motor control to navigate that visualization. Filter objects, they also take up real estate and any other unnecessary objects. And if we think back to the website I was showing you, other objects can make operation of your visualization more difficult. Understandable. Information and the operation of the user interface must be understandable. So this is a real visualization problem where, and this is what I was talking about, the Sankey chart, where the visualization takes away from what you're trying to convey. If you haven't watched Maria's session from a couple of weeks ago, go grab that one as well. It's phenomenally presented, if nothing else. But she talks brilliantly about how good visualization principles improve how something looks. But her worked example actually really improved the accessibility of the thing as well. Following good data storytelling principles can really help with meeting the need to be understood, but it doesn't need to be explicitly addressing accessibility adjustments. Good visualization will be more accessible. And the final point here from the WCAG is robust. Content must be robust enough that it can be interpreted reliably by a wide variety of user agents, including assistive technologies. Now, a lot of visualization tools today make this a bit more difficult because they don't give the configurability you need to respond to every technology requirement. It's something we see more with like web developed tools and web developed visualization give you a great level of configurability. But it's definitely worth, if you have the option, depending on the tool you're using, thinking about how your visualization acts with other tools. Okay. Excuse me. So that's some of the edited highlights from the last session. So let's move on to what I have learned since then. My job has changed a lot in the last 2 years, not just in terms of a business domain, but I went from creating visualizations in Tableau to being a technical business analyst and working with things like Databricks. I've also worked a lot more with those kind of UI experiences that are not visualization specific as well. So that's all helped really expand my understanding of accessibility. It's also aware that how much data it actually takes just to sell a pint as well. But let's look at some of the key things I've picked out that I've learned in the past couple of years, like new words, shall we say. So visual stress. I learned this from a friend who was diagnosed with dyslexia at the age of 44. Symptoms for visual stress include poor concentration, difficulties with reading, and some sensitivities. While usually associated with dyslexia, it's not exclusive to dyslexia. Adjustments for it include working with different color paper or backgrounds, colored overlays, screen filters, or colored glasses. Everyone who suffers from visual stress will have a different color that helps them. My friend's personal preference is having a purple background. I definitely struggle with reading digital information. Like if you have ever sent me a link to something, I'm truly sorry, mate. There's a good chance I haven't read it and will have been playing fast and loose with every conversation about it since. I really struggle with text-heavy digital content, and maybe I'm just old. When I do have to deal with large or technical documents, I actually find that printing is my preferred route, because that enables me to move it to a way and read and perceive it in a way which is more helpful for my brain. Next up, accessibility overlays. These are third-party technologies designed to reduce accessibility issues on websites. Now, I actually talked about this at the first session I did without knowing that this was the word for it. But the example I used at the time is when you go on the Zara website, there is a figure in the bottom right corner that allows you to apply accessibility tools to the page. Now, there's caveats with this. Broadly a good thing, might make it more usable for some people. At the same time, and this is specific, the current Zara homepage is a hellscape of flashing images and moving content, which an accessibility overlay doesn't help with. So it's better maybe for using on text type web pages and less kind of those design-led pages. But it's worth having a look at the Zara website. If you can stand it, click on that little guy at the bottom and see what the options are there for tooling. What I would also say is that a lot of accessibility experts are critical of questioning of overlays. So it's worth doing some of the reading on that, is that they're not addressing the problems that they need to address, but people are quickly relying on them as a way of going, I made it accessible. Finally, solutions and problems. These are not new words. I knew these words before, but just as a theme for something I have learned. A step I skipped at the previous session was where we assume that data visualization is the correct solution to a problem. Now, given the context of these sessions, it would be super weird to not talk about data visualization as a solution. But one of the things is kind of taking a step back to that point where someone has asked you for a visualization or you've been given a brief for it, that start of your creative process. Now, I have seen this in every area I've worked in, and I've done it myself, so this is no shade, but we all very quickly jump to the solution without making sure we've addressed the real problem. Like we don't even use language, like what is the actual problem we are trying to solve? So it's easy for that problem statement to get lost. And I think when you think about it, you probably never find someone who had a problem where the real solution was a dashboard of monthly sales for the last year. Their problem was probably something more like, I don't know what my sales were last Christmas, so I don't know what to do this year. Now, the answer to that could just be, you sold more this year, and that's not a dashboard, that's a post-it note at best. And that's not to say we should never build a dashboard. Massively oversimplifying the problem. But one of the points I'm trying to make now, and I tried to make it previously, is it's about understanding what your user actually needs. And that should include their accessibility needs as well. Even no matter how accessible you make the solution, if you've given them the wrong solution, it is still inaccessible. Getting into design practices and those active conversations with your users before you jump straight into building will improve your life for sure. And also you can start to drive out some of those things that people really need. Okay. So let's talk about landscape changes. So this is a bit of a sad face area for me. I haven't seen any evidence of real change in how accessibility is changing data visualization. I don't think it's the fault of data visualization as a concept, and I don't think it's the fault of the community. There have been regulatory changes, brackets general, in the last year that suggest that things are changing overall about accessibility. So there's a 2025 European Accessibility Act, which covers digital services like banking and e-commerce. It will work on the basis of compliance with the WCAG standards, and compliance will be enforceable by national authorities. In the UK, you're already bound by the Equality Act and the public sector accessibility regulations, if that applies to you. And there are also some changes planned for the accessibility guidelines overall. They're draft stage, so further away from implementation. So I think the European Act definitely is interesting, as it shows a willingness in some areas to start adding regulation around the area of accessibility. Whole other presentation on whether regulation helps fix a problem or not. But there is an element of regulation coming to it, which suggests it is more of a focus for some people. That said, the overall landscape for disability and inclusion isn't great at the moment anyway. DEI projects are being defunded for political and financial reasons, and those choices reflect what business priorities are. And this is probably nothing new. But until we start to see accessibility in the same light as commercial benefit, which it should be, investments aren't going to be made in truly accessible products. So the money, the funding to give you the time to make accessible products is probably not there. There's also investment choices in terms of AI versus not AI, and we will get into how AI is impacting data visualization specifically. Rightly or wrongly, so much interest and investment in AI, and money will get spent on that AI pathway over the accessible pathway. In some ways, it will be right to choose an AI-led solution because it addresses both parts of that problem, but it shouldn't be used to buy a solution that doesn't address the problems and the accessibility needs of the user. So there's a real kind of tight line to, I guess, thread around AI of not going for something that is the quick and shiny versus the, again, what really works for users as well. So coming on to, is AI a hindrance or a help? I think I've changed my mind about this about 5 times this week. So one of the things I didn't consider in my last presentation was through the lens of the creator and their accessibility needs and the consumer and their accessibility needs. At that time, I was very much recovering from getting yelled at by yet another architect about accessibility. So my thinking was very much from the consumer perspective. But when I thought about it, I hadn't thought about my own experience as a creator. Some of those problems I talked about earlier in terms of like, it was difficult for me to create things that I didn't know how to do because I just kept being given these sequential lists of instructions in some way. So to bring this back to AI, long run up, we'll look at how AI tools are impacting visualization from both lenses, both that of the creator and that of the consumer as well. Now, to make sure I understood the experience of AI, I tried to create a simple dashboard in a popular BI tool, and I lost the will after 10 minutes. It was not a good experience for me. But once again, gen problem. We'll take a more generalized look. So what you'll start to see already in terms of certainly BI tools specifically, things like conversational tooling. And everyone is now loving conversational tooling, and it absolutely has its benefits. Platforms will tell you that you can now create like X, Y thing with natural language. And that is actually great for new users or those with accessibility needs, where complicated UI navigation journeys create barriers. It might be easier to type a one-line sentence of what you like and click 10 buttons. Now, while I was trying to use a conversational version, I just ended up in a button clicking fest anyway. So I think that reduced any of the benefit I could have got. But I can definitely see how that conversational element as a creator could make things more accessible. Again, for me personally, my brain, if I have to keep refining that question when it is something I could do with a couple of clicks, from that task persistence basis, if I have to keep refining or reframing the question, my brain starts to check out the process as well. So that conversational element doesn't necessarily work for me as well. Also, having kind of predictable navigation patterns in something is, some people will just learn, I have done this 100 times, I don't need to think about it. Replacing that with a conversational element doesn't necessarily increase its accessibility or its usability in any way. But that said, doing repeatedly clicking things requires those certain motor skills as well. So being able to type or use a voice prompt, I can see that there are benefits as a creator to having a different way to interact with your chosen visualization tool. I think these features will absolutely develop, and what I'm talking about here is my personal responses to them. Everyone has different needs and different accessibility requirements. But yeah, I think these will develop, and definitely there are bigger brains than me are fairly convincing about how AI will change the nature of UI experiences as a whole. You'll be able to do multi-step tasks in different applications. So what was previously clicking on open files or processing data over here and then doing something over here will start to lead into a more simplified prompt process. We're already seeing it with things like Tableau and Power BI, trying to start to pull data together behind the scenes so that you're not spending that time on some of those kind of data processing tasks. I think in theory, it all sounds great. I need to try it myself, and I'd love to start to see feedback of how people who have accessibility needs as a creator are starting to feel about some of those changes. So that's from a creator perspective. Let's talk about then from a consumer perspective, from the users of visualizations. There is an argument that AI means that consumers can now become creators more easily. It's data visualization as a skill has become more accessible because you're not as dependent on somebody creating that dashboard for you that then doesn't suit your needs. They have a different experience to you. So you could argue that less experienced users with the use of AI tools could build exactly what suits them, or you get back to that conversational element. So you could be asking AI, how do I make this thing? That makes it easier for you to create something that works for you. I have slight PTSD from the citizen dev and the self-service conversations we used to have, where we were trying to get everybody to build their own dashboards, and people built terrible things and then complained about it, and it just didn't kind of work. There's a potential for that pathway and that experience to be repeated with AI. I do think that AI is kind of filling some of those gaps where people maybe didn't have like some of the data knowledge they needed or some of the tool knowledge they needed to be truly self-servicing. So I think definitely there is a way that where we become more reliant on AI to help non-technical people do creation. I think we will see benefits there. That is not to say that we will replace creators with consumer creators. I absolutely think that creators still have a space, and their skills will only get better when they get to use AI in positive ways. There is also that opportunity that as a consumer, I've discovered this recently, you get something you don't like, you can ask AI to fix it for you. So if I come back to my old friend here, if I wanted to, when this was making me furious before, if I wanted to improve it or change it, I needed the software to create it. I needed the data set and the understanding and the knowledge to recreate this in a way that worked for me. But now I can kind of ask AI to help. I said before, I am a light mode support until I die, but I know a lot of people find dark mode infinitely more accessible. But last time I looked, like in Tableau, we were still having to create 2 dashboards. So instead, I said, can we take this, which might not suit a person? I asked AI, can we change this to dark mode friendly? And we took a great swing at it. It's a step in the right direction. It's now dark, at least. It has gone on Color Safari in a couple of places. So we have lost some of the data in West, and we've lost some of the data in South as well. But the initial ask, almost moving in the right direction. So I asked it again, can we do it dark mode friendly, really? And still kind of got slight changes to it. Again, we're still missing data that we had up here, and some of the color change is gone. But if the instant ask was, I just don't like light mode, then it's kind of addressed some of that, but it's still not necessarily showing what you would want it to show. And then I remembered that because I don't like Sankey charts, can I just get a bar chart instead? And I did still ask for it in dark mode. So close. You can even see at the top dark mode bar chart. So it's done 50% of that ask, and I love the fact that it has tried so very, very hard. This is a deeply unscientific approach to this problem, but it does show like I did get to use AI as a companion. It did help me with some of the problems I had, and that is true for both creators and consumers of data visualization. And I think we all know this when we're listening to commentary about AI, it's not infallible and it should never be used as an alternative to genuinely accessible experiences. There's also an element if you say, hey, fix it yourself, you're passing that labor onto a person with accessibility needs rather than addressing it at source. So that brings us to the end. And just a couple of points to make now. Now I've got my Sankey chart range out of the way. AI can't capture genuine emotional and physical responses in the same way a human can. We can sense and process tone, expression, and language in a way that AI can't. So you, as creators, whatever your role is, play that key part in having those conversations and understanding what people really need. It's not to say you should exclude AI from your solutions. Use it as a knowledge base for making your own work more accessible, addressing your own accessibility needs even. But only you can take those requirements from the user to the end product. No technology replaces genuine inclusion. AI can be a helpful companion, but will never replace that human element that is needed to make people feel genuinely included. And just to say thanks at the end, so thanks to Steve for having me back, and the Data Lab for also having me back, and also to Rima. Rima has been a GenGates apologist since the first time I did this presentation. Until Wednesday, this presentation was going to be entirely composed of one-word slides if it wasn't for her. So thank you to Rima as well. You can find me on LinkedIn as Jen Gates. Please do feel free to spam me. I will occasionally read it and answer some of your questions. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Jen. That was super interesting and great to kind of revisit the topic after a couple of years. We've got quite a few questions have come in, so we'll start working our way through those. And if you're on the call and you've got any questions, just pop them in the Q&A and we'll kind of get round to those. The first one is coming from Phil, who's asked, how do you find the balance between creative freedom and ensuring that the visualizations are accessible to someone who may prefer something more stripped back?
When I work that out, I'll let you know, Phil. And it is incredibly difficult. And you've asked exactly what I went through with this presentation. Is previously it was very content heavy to be enabled people, because I understand like I talk quite quickly. So I was using a lot of content to kind of fill the gaps in my presentation. And I think, as I said, I don't have the exact answer. It's the conversations you can have with people, and it's also not creating a version where you're creating multiple versions of the truth. Is ultimately, as I said at the start, I have addressed something that I needed from this presentation by changing how I present the content. And I think you can just start to articulate that as part of your process or how you present things. Once people start to understand, there are some of those barriers there. So can you hear me?
Yeah, we could hear you fine, but just as you were answering that question, your mic seems to have gone a bit. Sorry, say that again.
Oh dear, we have lost me, haven't we?
No, I think we're good now. I think it was maybe just a slight. I don't know what it was, but we're back. We're back in business.
You're still plugged in. Don't worry, Steve.
Yeah.
Battery's not going down.
It was just briefly there, but yeah, no, sorry for interrupting.
So I don't know if I managed. Phil might have missed all that. Phil, please do ping me on LinkedIn or whatever. I'm happy to talk about through more. It is very difficult to balance creative and accessible. I completely understand that. And I think just as long as we're thinking about it, that is part of the journey we have to go through.
I think you might have said this when your mic was kind of playing up there. And I think you maybe mentioned this last time, but is there maybe something there around like having slightly different versions of the visualization, or sort of slightly like where the user can sort of make it accessible for them?
Yeah, and I think and it is, although I criticise Tableau for it as a tool where you had to create two dashboards when you wanted light and dark mode. Again, it's not to increase the labor of the creators here, but there are ways you can kind of have a version that maybe doesn't have some of the objects that other people might need. I've certainly done versions of things to get rid of the filter problem where it becomes like pages of a story, so people aren't clicking with things. So yeah, it's kind of, there are ways you can kind of, without duplicating your work, just adjust your work to meet maybe a broader audience.
Brilliant, thanks very much. So Polly has asked, have you found that your colleagues are as receptive to accessibility as you are, given that you've got sort of personal interests in accessibility?
Yes, and also no. I'm really a fence sitter these days, so thank you for the question. I think some people are incredibly receptive to it. And I think, and I do try and use it like in work conversations. So I will tell people, stop sending me links, I'm not reading them. So yeah, there's definitely, you can only kind of talk about what you need, but articulating your needs is actually really difficult, particularly in a work environment. Some people don't necessarily know it's a thing. So the moment you open up to it, they go mad for it. So I did a similar presentation to this when I first started at Zonal, which opened up loads of conversations and people wanted to come and talk to me more about it and those kind of things. So it's very much mixed. Is I try and fit it in with the work I do and using those personal stories as to this is why it impacts me. I think it's really helpful as well.
Yeah, I think I've been involved not in data visualization projects as such, but for example, the projects to like launch a new website, for example, and sometimes the accessibility side of things can some kind of come in as an afterthought. It's like, oh, we need to add in the accessibility. Have you got any kind of tips for with data visualization on kind of how you would build that in from the start, or are there any kind of workflows that you would recommend for people?
It's so a couple of things I would do. It's back to the conversations, is unless you know your user needs and finding a way to frame that question. Like if you aren't having any conversation with your user before you start, even if you didn't have accessibility needs, you're probably on the wrong track. So make it part of that initial conversation. And it isn't a case of going, what colors do you need? It's having those. And again, this is why the AI part of it won't work for those conversations, the humanistic responsive parts of that, where you pick up on what someone is saying. They might not be describing an accessibility need directly, but if you kind of listen to what they're saying, they're trying to tell you something that they need. So if when you're doing these kind of design things, incorporate that into the upfront conversation, that avoids it becoming less of an add-on at the end as well. Oh, there
Yeah,
was another thing. Yeah, just I remembered a thing I used to do was your personal brand. So I used to create visualizations and I would always have them be the same colors and the same kind of thing and not change them for people. So essentially you go, I only ever produce it like this. No, you can't have it in a different color. That saves it being an add-on at the end. You've just created a template for it using your own thoughts. And then that way it's not like forgotten.
great. Yeah, I think at the meetup that we ran earlier in the month, there was a lot of discussion around making sure, but the whole idea of the event was to kind of highlight how important it is to know who your audience is and who you're actually creating the visualization for. So like involving them in the conversation and making sure that you know their needs
100%.
before you start is kind of key to the success of it.
Yes, yes. Okay.
Okay, cool. So we've got a question in the chat from where is it? Let me find it here. From Rushir, who's asked, "Do you know if screen readers work with SVG yet, or is it only HTML?"
Oh, that's beyond my technical ken. So I think if SVG is an image file, then I'm not aware that they do, but don't also take that as gospel. I've literally just changed my job title so it doesn't have the word technical in it. But SVG, I'm guessing, would be replaced or enhanced with alt text. So if you have an image, if you put alt text on that image, the screen reader should read the alt text.
And just as you were answering that, a question's coming from Robin Hill.
Mhm.
A question and maybe some info there as well. The original idea of HTML was that there was actually very little control over the display. Then people progressively wanted more and more control over how information was displayed. Should we revert back to less producer control and more consumer control so that someone's own browser settings dominate,
Yeah.
perhaps AI enhanced preferences?
I think it will be that balancing act for sure. And as I say, when we look at like the accessibility overlays, is saying we're giving it back to the consumer to control it and balancing that against we're giving it back to the consumer so we don't have to make it accessible up front. So I think, Robin, it's a great question. And I think there will be a balancing point somewhere in between where absolutely consumers, because of the nuances and variations in accessibility needs, consumers should be able to do that. And that might be a good point where AI starts to translate those. So it's less specific button clicks and it is, this is Jen's accessibility
Mm.
needs as an AI question. as well. So yeah, I think definitely it should go that way, but not as far as being like, I just made it black and white, on you go, lads, that kind of thing.
Okay, great, thanks. So we've got two questions left. One from Polly, which I think you kind of answered in your presentation, which how have you seen AI change your approach to data viz and accessibility within them?
So I think I'm not as actively creating, but do use AI for just talking nonsense nicely. But what I have found is I would use it for kind of that top level question that says like, how do I do this? And get like rough inspo for it and then go from there. So personally, for someone with a busy brain, I have found it more helpful for that of like, Jen has a million thoughts. Can we turn that into a structured list? Ironically, I then find that the way, because I use Copilot, the way Copilot presents things, I'm not reading all of that, mate, it's oversharing. So I think definitely, and again, if I was having like, how could I make this more accessible? I would use AI for that as well, definitely if I wasn't sure the direction I was going. But I found it more in kind of approaching a task. I found it helpful there for just structuring my own thinking, or where do I want to start thinking?
Yeah, kind of just for that initial planning and kind of setting the
Yeah,
direction for where
yeah,
you're going to go next.
absolutely, yes.
Okay, great. And then we've got one last question from Jack that's come in, similar topic around AI. Do you see trained data visualizers or visualization specialists? I'm not sure what the best term is. Do you see them becoming guardians of AI data visualization creation in the future? Do you see a future where the role of a data visualizer changes to be more kind of AI driven or AI guardianship?
I think that I like the idea of AI guardianship more than anything. So I think it could be a case of, while you could have something that is completely AI generated, you would still have the human set over the top of that and be like, does it make sense? Is it accessible? Does it tell the story I want to see? So yeah, I would definitely say, and I think everyone accepts it with AI is there's still human in the loop. We're not, nobody's expecting it to replace everything unless you're completely crazy. So yeah, I definitely think that the people who have the domain knowledge, and this applies in quite a few places, do become those kind of guardians of what AI is producing, and also making sure that that last and the first part of the human interaction that really captures what people need doesn't get lost, for sure.
Brilliant. Well, thanks very much, Jenny. It's been a really interesting session, and thanks everybody for coming along and asking your questions. You mentioned if people got any more questions or they want to get in touch, is LinkedIn the best
Yes,
way to contact you?
yes, find me on LinkedIn, please. And yeah, do the connection thing. I'm not a particularly good guardian of my own personal privacy there. So yeah, you can absolutely contact me on LinkedIn. As I say, Steve, I will get the slides to you and you'll get them to the attendees as well.
Yeah, so we've recorded the session today as well. So once the recording's ready, I'll send around an email to everybody with a link
Perfect.
and a link to your slides as well. But yeah, thanks again. It's been really great
Thanks
to
for having
chat
me
to you
today.
again.
Got to get the
Just
battery going as well.
yeah, we made it all the way through to the end. My my dog was sick in the background, so that was nice. But other than that, but anyway, so our as I mentioned at the start, we've got a data visualization competition running at the moment. If you've not seen it already, there's a link in the chat so you can find out a bit more. It's open till the 16th of January. So if you are interested in taking part, there's still loads of time to get involved. Really interesting data from the Edinburgh Climate Change Institute. I have to remember to enunciate that one properly. So yeah, if you're interested in getting involved, check it out and hopefully we'll see some interesting data visualizations coming through. But yeah, thanks again, Jenny, and see you soon.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye bye.